She didn't get called. You did. He said, she's young and you're young. He said, let me tell you something. Don't let these old preachers stop you from enjoying your family. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I know people will tell you what preachers are not supposed to do. He said, but that's not based on the Bible. It's based on tradition. He said, if your wife want to go out and have a good time, go with her. If she want to go to a club, go with her. If she want to go, do some things, he said, go with her. There's nothing in the Bible that says you can't be saved and still go places. He said, walk in saved, walk out saved.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the CB Baker Show. I got a great guest and we finally got him on, Dr. Daniels, my pastor, my mentor, my friend and family member, all of which is equal, I should say. I'm proud to say that I know you. And we have got another podcast, which everybody that's watching this most likely knows about, which is Everyday Strong with Dr. Michael G. Daniels. So I got him on my show. And what I want to talk to you today, Dr. Daniels, about is I want you to tell your story of when you got called to ministry. And like the same question asked the other pastors and ministers, did lightning strike and thunder roll, or was it just a little tap on the shoulder or whisper in the ear?
I don't personally think lightning strikes and thunder ever rolls, but I do think people like to say it, right? No, it wasn't that way at all. In fact, I'll say this. I preached my first sermon when I was about 7 years old now. And here's the situation.
Okay.
A group of us were playing outside one day, and we lived in Durham, but on the outskirts of Durham at the time. And so it was kind of rural area. And we're in the back playing, and we found a dead mouse, right? We find a dead mouse, and someone says we ought to have a funeral for it and bury the mouse. And so one of the young, kids said, well, Michael, you should do the sermon. And I said, well, okay, I think I can do that. So we went and got a shoebox from one of the kids' houses. We put the mouse in the shoebox. We dug a hole. We put the mouse in the hole, and I started preaching a sermon. And the irony of it is this, and no kidding, it was about maybe 10 of us kids. About 7 of the kids were crying. I mean, literally tears. They were falling out crying at the funeral for this mouse.
Wow.
Okay. So one of the kids' grandmothers heard about it, who, to us was a very godly, saintly kind of lady. She probably wasn't as old as we thought she was. We thought she was like 100 years old, but she probably wasn't. And so anyway, she said to me then, you're going to be a preacher, because she heard they went and told her that everybody was crying when I preached that sermon. I don't remember what the sermon was about, none of that kind of stuff, but all I remember is I was 7 and the mouse, we hope he went to heaven because it was, right. So, but that wasn't my career objective, I'll tell you that. It wasn't my career objective, and actually my career objective was pre-med. I was a pre-med major. Okay. And my plan was to be a psychiatrist. That's what I wanted to be. But one day we started having dances and charging people. So we were charging people for dances. And I said, you know what? This fits my personality more. Because at the time, I must say, I was a pretty larceny-hearted individual. And so that fit my personality. Right. And so I changed my major because my desire was to have a string of nightclubs. I wanted to have upscale nightclubs in every major city on the East Coast. And that was my dream. That's what I was going to do. Which certainly is not quite where I am right now. Right. So anyway, as things happen, God has a way of putting things in perspective through trials. And I think if you read the Bible, as I know you do, you think most people come to really understand God through their trials and not through their successes, right? And so that's what happened to me. I faced a trial. I was still in school. As a matter of fact, I was accepted to go to medical school, right? But I loved money. And so that kind of threw me off track.
Right.
So I moved to do that, and money got the best of me. And so I never went to that first semester. Didn't even go.
Wow.
Didn't even go. I didn't go for a stupid reason, right? Again, it was money. My cousin said to me, borrow the money. He said, different to make. You get out, you pay it back. Well, we were looking at maybe like at that time, maybe $80,000 that I had to borrow totally. And I was like, 80, it was just like, it's this astronomical amount in my head.
Right.
So I got a job. Well, getting a job, everything fell apart. I mean, everything fell apart. I believe it was in God's plan though. Everything falls apart. I end up having to come back home. I came back home, homeless for a while, sleeping in my car, this kind of thing. My mother, unbeknownst to me, invites the pastor to the church, has me talk to him for a little bit. And he says to me, listen, why don't you try God for 30 days? Try him for 30 days. If you don't like him, go back to the devil. Everything will be all right. The devil will always take you back.
Right.
I did what he said do, and I have not looked back, right? Now, I never thought that I was called to the ministry per se. I thought I was called to be the pastor of Enoch Baptist Church. If I was not the pastor of Enoch Baptist Church, I would not be the pastor anywhere else. I that was where my heart was at.
Right.
And even though I have been asked on many occasions to pastor other places, even before I pastored at Enoch, I was running for 2 other churches. It just didn't fit where I thought my heart was. So for me, it was always going to be Enoch because I felt like that's where I was called to be. And so, no, it wasn't lightning striking. It wasn't none of that kind of stuff. It was just a burning feeling in my heart that that's where I was supposed to be. But being pastor for me at that time wasn't preaching.
Right.
It wasn't preaching. Being pastor for me at that time was cutting the grass. It was doing the plumbing. It was fixing leaking roofs. That's what I was doing for the most part.
Right.
You know, as a matter of fact, the first day I became the pastor, I didn't even preach at the church. I spent it all day Saturday painting the church.
Wow.
You know, yeah, because that's how I viewed my role.
Right.
You know, is really doing what was necessary to keep the church moving forward. That's how I viewed my role, and I view that as a supportive role to the pastor. Even though he had retired, I still viewed myself as being a support of him. So even though by then time I was responsible for the sermons and everything, the direction of the church was coming through him. Because I would still go to his house. Not that he told me to do it, but that's what I would do.
Right.
I would go to his house, you know, minimum 4 times a week and just sit down and talk to him. And, you know, what should I do? Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? How do you want me to do this? And he was still directing me. And he did that until he got too sick to talk to me. And then he died. And that's when I really became the pastor.
Right.
It's when he died.
Now, when you started getting into ministry, was there any moments where you had any doubt in yourself?
No, not really. There were moments where I wanted to not stay in the ministry, but it wasn't because I doubted myself. Mm-hmm. There were moments because I felt like I was neglecting my family.
Okay.
You know, because I was still working. I mean, I was bivocational.
Right.
So I'm working for the federal government, and the job I had required a lot of travel. And so I'm going a lot for the federal government, and then I'm going when I come home because I'm dealing with the church business, you know,
right.
Preaching, I'm visiting people. There were Christmases that rather than me being home with my children, I'll be out delivering food to people, you know, because at that time we had probably, I would say 60% of the congregation was below the poverty level.
Right.
You know, when I you know, maybe the first 5 years of my pastorate and those kind of things. And not only that, I was going back to school. You know, I had my master's. Had my master's, had my MBA. But Reverend Walton said to me, "Hey, you need to go back to school. You know, it's truly you understand management, but you don't know theology."
Right.
So I went back to school to get my doctorate. So I'm working full time for the government. I'm going to school to get my doctorate, and I'm pastoring full time. You know.
So, how did your wife handle that?
Initially, not well, you know, because again, we had small children.
Right.
And her thing was, you know, you neglecting your children, you neglecting your home, you know, all those kinds of things. And she reminded me, you got called and not me, you know. And so, but, you know, you balance them out.
Right.
You know, so, and I had a nice long talk with us. Reverend Walton had passed because Reverend Walton was old school. See, Reverend Walton's position was simply this. You tell her what to do and move on. You're the head of your household.
Right.
But anyway, Reverend Walton had passed because he passed a couple years after I became the pastor. And I went to another senior pastor who was probably old enough to be my father. Well, he was old. I know he was old enough to be my father. He probably was older than my father.
Right.
So, as a matter of fact, I know he was. So he was old enough to be my grandfather, actually. So anyway, I'm talking to him, and he says to me, he said, "Let me explain something to you, young man." He said, "Your wife is right." He said, she didn't get called, you did. He said, she's young and you're young. He said, let me tell you something. Don't let these old preachers stop you from enjoying your family. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I know people will tell you what preachers are not supposed to do. He said, but that's not based on the Bible. That's based on tradition. He said, if your wife want to go out and have a good time, go with her. If she want to go to a club, go with her. If she want to go, do some things, he said, go with her. There's nothing in the Bible that says you can't be saved and still go places. He said, walk in saved, walk out saved.
Right.
And so I think that bit of advice kind of changed things for me. Because, the irony of it is that some of the ministers that we admire the most, they did those kind of things. We just didn't see them in that light. For example, Martin Luther King, right? Martin Luther King not only drank, but he smoked.
Right.
Okay, right? Now, we know this because there are clips of him doing that, right?
Right.
But if you tell people, they'll be, oh, no, wait, not Martin. Martin didn't smoke, Martin didn't drink, right? But we know, we know he did. So,
right.
But I'm not advocating either one of those. I'm just saying he was a human being, right? The same thing, like with, you be watching, let's say, some kind of award show on TV, Jesse Jackson be in the front row.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if Michael Daniels is in the front row, you say, well, what are they doing, sitting there, with all the cussing and joking going on? So his thing to me was, hey, listen, don't let people become your God. Let God be your God and let the Lord lead you. And that kind of changed things. Because then I could be me and not what people wanted me to be.
So now when you went into ministry, I've asked you this off air, so I know the answer, but I got to ask for the audience. Did you lose any friends? Did friends fall off, or did things kind of just stay the same?
I won't say friends fell off. What I will say is friends wanted to respect me. It wasn't so much that they stopped hanging around with me, but they were unsure, of what to invite me to. And they were unsure. They didn't want to disrespect me. I'm put it that way. Because
right.
I've had them say this to me. I would go back to, go to work on Monday or something. And we'd be talking and somebody would say, you know what? We did this for the weekend. And he said, I was kind of worried whether or not to invite you or not because I knew it was going to be, X, Y, and Z. And I'd be like, well, it wouldn't have bothered me. I said,
right.
My family members haven't changed. My brother's still doing X, Y, and Z. Like, oh, okay. Well, now that I know, then next time I'll invite you. And so that's kind of how it went. So then they did subsequently, get right back to saying, yeah, hey, come on over, man. We're going to be busting some spades. We're going to be doing this or we're going to be doing that. And, I still had to watch me because the Bible says, let not your good be evil spoken of.
Right.
Do nothing whereby you bring shame to the gospel. Because it says you don't want to be a stumbling block for other people. So there were certain things that I wouldn't go to. Not that they didn't invite me, but I just said, that's not the right thing for me to do because I don't want to bring shame on the church. I don't want people, I don't want to be a stumbling block for people. For some people, they were mature enough for me to be there.
Right.
For people who were not mature enough, I would not go around.
Yeah, I had a situation to where this guy called me up and said, I like what you're saying because, you got to live life, blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah. I said, but, I probably won't go to a strip club anymore for the rest of my life. And plus, I won't really going anyway.
Right.
He said, well, ain't nothing wrong with that. You watch Power, don't you? Like, watch Power? I said, yeah, I watch Power. But there's a big difference between playing football and watching football. It's like, no. It's like, I was like, yeah, I watch Power, but I'm not, no.
Well, and that's the thing. The thing I look at is this. It's not just would you do it. It's because you're married, would you do it? You know what I mean? It's the maturity thing.
Right.
And what my mother said to me was simple and I think very true. She said, don't go anywhere your wife can't go. It doesn't mean she has to go,
right?
But don't go anywhere your wife can't go. And she said the same thing with your wife. She shouldn't go anywhere you can't go. But it doesn't mean, you want to go everywhere she goes. I think that to me puts it in perspective is that I won't go anywhere that any other member of the church couldn't go and be comfortable going.
Right.
And so if they would be uncomfortable, then I should be uncomfortable because again, I don't want to be a stumbling block for them. Now initially that might have been problematic. In 2021, it's not because every member of Enoch Baptist Church knows Michael G. Daniels. So, it's no big deal. They know what.
Right.
If we go to the comedy club and somebody on the front row screaming, hey, that's probably our pastor down there doing it.
Right.
Or we go to a football game and our pastor's screaming at the coach. It's no big deal. But I think to me, that's the thing. The same thing about cookouts. Members of Enoch Baptist Church invite me to cookout. They invite me to birthday parties. They invite me to all that kind of stuff, and they still be themselves. And I'm so happy that they are themselves when they invite me places.
Right.
And I'll even joke with them sometimes, and I'll say, "Listen, I'm getting ready to go now, so y'all can open the trunks up and let you know I'm getting ready to go. So
right.
you can break the bars open, right? Not that they wait, but but it doesn't. I'm in a different place. I'm much more secure in my pastorate, but I'm also much more secure in the people and the teaching.
Right.
And so I realize that they know more now. They understand salvation. They can appreciate that it's not by works lest any man should boast, but it's by that faith you have in Christ as your personal Savior, that He is your high priest, and that He is the one that takes His own blood as your sacrifice, and that changes the whole dynamic.
Yeah, I found for myself that one of the hardest things to wrap my head around, and my wife told me, she said, CB, you don't do nothing anyway. Mm-hmm. When I first came to her, where she was like, yeah, I can see you doing that because you don't do nothing. It's like, you ain't got to change nothing. Like, just be you. So, but I did find like, okay, if I get invited somewhere, it's like, should I go there or shouldn't I go there? Like, you start overthinking stuff. That's one reason why I said, it'd be good to have a, podcast where I ask, like literally I could ask other pastors how they went from point A to point B. So now what would be what would you say to a new pastor, a young pastor? Let's say he's 26 years old, 25, 26 years old. He's just been elected to be the pastor of a small church. Let's say it's 500 people. Mm-hmm. What was
medium size though?
Medium size.
That's medium size. Medium size people. Yeah.
What would be your advice to him?
To listen to the people in the church that are maturer than you, because pastoring is not just about preaching. Pastoring is about leadership.
Right.
And leadership requires you to understand the people that you lead. And the people that will understand them the most are the senior people that have been around, seen some things, but also have a good appreciation of the culture of the organization, because churches have a culture. All churches don't have the same culture.
Right.
And if you're going to pastor, you need to understand the culture of that church so you can begin to lay your vision out, and you need a vision. But, I know we always say, well, change is hard and change is beneficial, but all change ain't beneficial.
Yeah.
And there is a benefit to tradition. And the church is one of those organizations that is a theocracy and not a democracy. And so the culture of the church has to first be developed by our relationship with God, Jesus Christ. And so that's the paramount culture. But then there's also the culture of the people, and their traditions and the things they have done and to build up where they are. And so you don't want to come into a church with an antagonistic attitude because they are not moving as fast as you want to move, or they're not moving where you want them to move.
Right.
They've been there 30 years. Grandmama put that Bible on the pulpit. Great grandmama put that stained glass window there. You can't just throw all that away.
Right. Yeah, because I've noticed a lot of churches, especially during the pandemic, they took the PPP money and they remodeled the inside of the church to make it look way more modernized. You got LED screens behind people now, and But I was always wondering, like, did they ask the congregation to do this? Because some congregations be like, well, I don't really want that. I want the old school feel to it,
right.
And so how do you feel about that? About the way the church is, the direction that the actual physical church is going?
I don't have a problem with the physical church because the physical church has evolved. Churches were in homes, right? And they moved from homes to, in Jesus' day, of course you had the temple, but Christian churches were in homes during Jesus' time and post Jesus. They were in church. But as we became more formalized, that's when we started to develop churches because they were emulating the temples, the Jewish temples, basically. So And churches at that time didn't have large memberships, 25, 50 people, because again, it was in a home and that was it. There's some advantages and disadvantages to modernization and to the mega churches. It's hard to pastor people at a mega church. You can be the pastor of the church,
right?
But that don't mean you pastoring the people, because you can't touch everybody's life. It's just impossible. You can't do that. You become a preacher and a manager, which is fine. I'm nothing against mega churches. I'm saying, that's what it is. So I think some modernizations are good, but I can modernize a church without modernizing my worship. So to me, that's the key, is that worship is something that doesn't change, because God doesn't change. He says, I am the same today, yesterday, and forever will be. And so how we worship is outlined in Scripture. And so that part should not be changed, right? And I know some people say, well, this is in 2021. Okay, but you act like God won't the same in 2000 BC.
Right.
And he said he wasn't different. So if he wasn't different, then why am I worshiping him differently? I can use different mechanisms.
Right.
But the basic worship shouldn't change.
Yeah, because I've noticed it's turning almost into like stages, where people are preaching from now.
Well, Jesus had a stage.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus didn't preach from a pulpit, right?
Right.
No, he didn't preach. That's what I'm saying. He didn't preach from a pulpit.
Even one time from a floating boat.
That's my point, right? Is that so the physical church, right? I have no problem with that changing, right? But the message, salvation, because it's 2021, it ain't gonna change.
Right.
What Christ did in 33 AD is, depending on how you draw the timeline, It would either be 29 AD or 33 AD. But either one, what he did back then is still applicable today. It didn't like it changed. It's not like the cross is irrelevant now.
Right.
It's not like the resurrection is irrelevant now. And that's the part I'm saying is going to be the same, is the basic doctrinal truths that are outlined in the Bible. The stage concept, the worship periods, having worship leaders,
right,
that kind of thing. David implemented a worship leader. That's not new. It's just everything just keeps coming back, and we act like it's new. David implemented choirs. He implemented all that kind of stuff. So we're not doing anything new. We're just going right back around in circles. That's all.
Gotcha. Well, next question. Message from pastors. How come some pastors are so hitting you with more negative things versus the positive aspects of the Bible?
Well, I mean, that's the vision God gave them again. So, right. The vision is for the people, right? If you read the Old Testament, for example, the Northern Kingdom didn't get the same message the Southern Kingdom got, right? Because it depends on where you were as a group of people. Right. For one kingdom, it was, you all are going to be in exile, and you're going to get your butt whooped, and you're going to stay there for a long time, this kind of thing. So I think it's the same thing. Every pastor is giving to pastor a group of people, and different people are at different places. And some people at a place where the positive motivational stuff is what they need. Some people at a place where I need to kick your behind and get you straight is what they need, right? You don't motivate the gangbanger. You don't motivate the whoremonger, right? Because I got to first stop you from being a whoremonger. Right. Then I got to motivate you. So that's why you got to, look at where's your congregation at, and you minister to everybody, but you got to realize that culture. And if the culture is, these are people who already are in a position to move forward, I just got to help them with their faith so they can. It changes whether or not you got a brand new congregation and they still are bullheaded, stiff-necked, as the Bible says. If I got stiff-necked people, I got to get a message for their stiff-neckedness so they can get themselves together.
All right. So thank you so much, Dr. Daniels, for joining the show. And I know people, because I'm going to post this on both the Enoch page and my channel as well. So I know some information you have shared today, some people may not have known about you, because you told me a story that I did not know. And we've been talking for 5 years, almost weekly for 5 years. But thank y'all so much for tuning in and listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. This is your host, CB Baker. Till next time.